Hello everybody, my name is Eric Mullins, and today we're going to be checking out Max Factory's Kan Colle Collection's Kouwan Seiki, otherwise known as the Harbour Princess or the Seaport Hime. She's a 1/8 figure. Yeah, it makes sense. In the franchise, she's actually a very large character, so that totally adds up. She almost feels like a 7.5. Pretty nice. I'm gonna do my best to keep my gushing at a minimum because I absolutely love this character. It's really a mashup of different themes that I love like crazy, but I won't let this get in the way of my integrity, my resolve, and being as objective as possible. The base of her base plate is very nice. I personally would have liked to see the reds have a bit of a lighter orangey hue to them here and there, so it feels a bit more like magma or melting rocks. But it is still well executed. The stones themselves could have perhaps used a couple of lighter colors, but it does look like it's that dark magma stone. But it is very effective, and it helps at really making this whole entire figure pop due to the dark contrast in its nature. This base plate is hollowed out, but in no way does it feel flimsy or thin. It's super thick plastic. And of course, because she's kneeling, this figure does not wobble whatsoever. This is a very solid figure. But wait! There's more. She has parts of her destroyed rigging going along the left side of her body. It seems like it's melted into this magma, and everything is twisted and contorted. We don't get any highlights here, but we do get some nice shading. As we go towards her back, and she has this awesome plug that clicks into her back. You actually have to plug this in to put her on here. Does she come off the base? Yes, she does. Will I show you today? No, because it's not an easy feat putting her in here and taking her out, and it's not something I'm comfortable doing. So be mindful of this if ever you want to take her apart and then ship her or maybe pack her up to be able to move. I guess them's the breaks when you get a figure that's as solid as this one once she's all put together. It's not necessarily the easiest or most fun thing to take apart. I absolutely love the gradient that we get on this plug, and it's not just a perfect wire, it's all weird and contorted and there's little kinks in it. Very cool. We have more pieces that seem like they're melted metallics of her rigging. The parts that are melted all along the bottom of the base here have this cool rib cage effect done with metallic paints. And the shark thing that looks like it's dead and slowly melting into this magma looks terrific. We have a beautiful gradient going along it with amazing paint detail to indicate all sorts of nerves across the skin. Her skin is pearlized, and the teeth also have lovely gradients, and they are not pearlized. So they pop out pretty nicely. Well sculpted, almost makes me think of something you'd see out of Evangelion in its design. The tongue itself has its own unique glossy texture that's gray, some real deathly shading on it. This whole thing is extremely creepy, and I love that. On top of this Sharkticon, we have a lovely runway. I mean, she is a Seaport Hime after all, so this is where all the little planes get to fly off and go attack their opponents. The planes oftentimes look like planes, but when we're talking about the abyssal fleet from the Kantai Collection, they tend to look a lot like this thing here. However, there are no planes included with this set. These end up coming with the WO-class aircraft carrier. The runway itself is all cracked. We have a lovely sparkly sparkles pattern going across it, shading and gradients for the lighter whitish line work here. What's interesting is that this runway is kind of thick, and if you look at it, it's layered. We can see some little lines and stuff like that, almost as if this were a real runway, and these are the supporting beams and metallic pieces inside to keep its construction intact. It's the attention to all the little details on this figure that really make her a home run. Her boots are lovely, and they have this nice texture to them that reflects what we see on the rest of her clothing. Very form-fitting, where we can see her ankles very well. We get beautiful folds in the fabric as she's bending her shoe, and I love the reflective metallics we have for her heels, as we do get a nice callback on some of her other armored pieces. Lovely dark metallic band along the top of these boots, as we then get into her extremely shapely legs. They're very well sculpted, beautiful calves, nice fold in her skin, lovely soft knees, nothing too pronounced, but it works really well with the rest of her. And her thighs look so soft that you could definitely fall asleep on these. It really does look like that is kind of the theme here. Just lie down and take a nap. Don't know if you'd ever wake up though. Ugh. We have some nice airbrushed shading on the thighs here and there. It's very subtle, and what helps make them seem so soft is the fact that her boots and her dress are really tight on her, and everything bevels out so nicely. Max Factory, you did an excellent job on this. Based off of how she's positioned, you can see her undergarments ever so slightly, though it's just a matte white and there's nothing really special there. She has these cute little armored clips that go between her dress and her thigh. It is kind of fun to have little pieces of armor here and there on her that serve just as decorative use. It helps give the character a bit more personality. The dress itself is... oh my gosh. A hardcore V-card killer. This thing is extremely tight, very shapely, shows off every single curve of her body, including her navel for this navel gal. Lovely stretches in the fabric. Everything here is a pearlized white and helps pop from the soft matte of her skin. I love the line work here because like real clothing with these kind of lines, it'll make someone seem longer and taller. The sculptor's made a beautiful side curve to her body here that just is so dynamic. You can't really see her behind that much, but the bit you do see is very shapely, well done. But even with a mirror behind this figure, you're not really gonna see it. Under her chest, we have these lovely pieces of armor. It seems as though it's bolted through her clothing and into her body. Beautiful Victorian design. And this thing really goes all around her rib cage and into her back. She has these really lovely jet engine looking pieces. These are really well made, and it's unfortunate that you don't really see them at all. Her back is bare, lovely, and has all these cool things going along her spine for the connecting piece of the tube in the back, but you're not going to see it, and even I couldn't take decent pictures of it. It's so minute, it's just nothing you're ever going to notice, which is kind of a shame. But knowing that they put so much hard work into a bunch of things that you're never going to notice does help at making this figure feel more three-dimensional and more real. Going up into her chest, this is hardcore side chest action. It shows off quite a bit. It's very beveled because of how tight her shirt is and the armature that's holding it all together. The skin here is very soft, well defined, and on the fabric of her dress, we get some lovely stretches where maybe her chest might be a little bit too pointy, but this is subjective and some of you might like that out there. It definitely pushes this figure from being PG to, let's just say, far from being X or R-rated. Hey, life is fun with a little bit of spice. And this figure does such a great job at balancing all that spice, cuteness, creepiness. You really get a bit of everything here, especially with her melancholic facial expression, which we'll get into later. The beautiful regal armor design that we have going up from her chest into her neck is... it's awesome. It looks so nice. Not only does it look gorgeous, but it definitely helps hiding any kind of weird neck issues that I've had with other figures in the past. You don't even need to think about it here. You can see that everything goes in, but it gets so dark and it's so tight that you can't actually see any connecting pieces. So the neck piece just looks beautiful. And what's lovely is that it's a separate mold from that of her chest. So it actually looks like it's being placed on top of her as opposed to something that's carved into her. Her shoulders, like her thighs, are surprisingly soft and supple. They even bevel outwards as they plug into her arms' clothing. We have these lovely armbands that have nice metallic sheen to them, a beautiful design that coincides with the rest of those on her armored pieces, where it then goes into these big white poofy sleeves. And what I find interesting is that looking at this, it doesn't feel like these sleeves are big and loose like you would have on a yukata. It really looks like they're filled in with something, which would be her enormously creepy, big, monstrous hands. But before we get into the hands, she has lovely armored pieces going right at the tips of the sleeves. They're very regal, old-school churches, and very French and France in its designs. She is very loosely based off of World War II characters, and I know that Kan Colle Collection really likes to focus on the villains being on the opposing side of the Germans during the World War II franchise. It is a Japanese game after all, and back then, if you're going to see things from the perspective of the Japanese, everything else would be the enemy. Despite that little hiccup, I tend to not look at it so much for that. I'm not somebody that really plays the video game, and I just freaking love the abyssal designs so much. It's the type of monster girl that's arguably my favorite, and I feel like there's just really not enough statues of these villains. My one little gripe with the armored pieces that we have at the tips of her sleeves, they should have came out a bit more metallic, like the other parts of her that are armored. Her hands are these epic white bone-looking claws that are nicely sectioned off with a black paint. We don't get a lot of shading or highlight here, but we do get a lovely, unique dry brush texture over a darker color. This makes things so creepy. On her left hand, I have a bit of a discoloration here. I don't know if this is the same for everybody or just me. And it's at this point that I'm going to mention that she does not reflect the artwork particularly well. The drawing for the artwork, you have her regular form and then her beat up, damaged form. And this seems like a figure that's somewhere in between, where she's clearly not damaged, but all of her rigging is. So they mashed up the two illustrations, and though I do think this looks absolutely beautiful and I prefer it like this than to have a damaged version of her, I might have liked to see like a nice polished rigging, though that might have cost significantly more, and in truth when she was released she was kind of expensive. Her face is... perfect. It looks so cute. Small, soft, adorable little mouth with a sweet rounded off nose, lovely shading on her face to be able to accentuate certain parts, gorgeous eyebrows that are printed on and reflect very well her emotional state. And then we get into these eyes, which are so good that I could argue they're the best eyes I have on any of my figures and any figures I've seen to date. We have a lovely dark makeup going along the bottom, which really shades her face nicely and gives her that creepy gothic look, while the eyelashes themselves appear to be like oil just spitting out from her eyes. They are just absolutely phenomenal. They're three-dimensional, they're popping out and everything, and they look thick. Just incredibly impressive. Once we get to the eyeballs themselves, I would have liked to see a little bit of gloss here. However, despite not getting any, I won't knock on it too much, because this is a very rare thing you'll see on a figure. Her eyes themselves have little pieces of reflective gold in them, which pop out nicely on that red, and it's really, really impressive. She then has this horn coming out of the center of her head, and this one, unfortunately, you can kind of see the mold line and where it was plugged into. It would have been nice to have it really flow out with a beautiful gradient. You can see that they tried to do it. They didn't succeed, but it's really not that bad from a shelf, only when you're looking up close. As for her hair, okay, so this is, unfortunately, the worst part of the figure, and it's just... The front of her hair is nicely done. We get a couple of little hair strands here and there. They look thick, chunky, like an anime. It's beautiful. But it then sections off to this one strand that comes down along the right side of her face. And you can clearly see how it's sectioned off here. That aside, the strand does look really beautiful, and depending on the angle you have her on, you're not going to notice it too much. The real issue comes when we look at the next chunk of hair that they put in here. And it really is a chunk. It's one single piece, and they could have made it two separate ones here, considering how they fold into her head. But you can see this clear, definitive line, because this thing is quite a few millimeters over the actual bangs coming down in the front of her face. So it pops out so much. And in the initial illustration, she doesn't have her hair that goes up and over like this. This popped out piece is extremely noticeable. Even their shading shows a higher lighted piece down there, that it almost feels like they made this mistake and it was too late to go back and change anything, and they just thought, whatever, release it as it is. The strands themselves come down beautifully, gorgeous sculpt work, very nice shading to make it pop out from some of the white that is on her dress. It's just a shame about how it connects into the head, where it then connects into multiple other little pieces along the back, and these are very noticeable too. Had we had more lines and had they just dug in a bit deeper with their carving, it wouldn't have been as noticeable. Here it's extremely noticeable. The lines are absurd, and the sculpt work at this point in the back of the hair is only okay. There's a couple of lines that dig in, but they don't actually commit to go the whole way through. We have a lot of highlights in some of the cracks here where it should be shading instead, and we have so many different chunked off pieces of plastic that are glued into one another here, and they're not done particularly professionally, so you just see everything. I'm aware that the back isn't something you're always going to see, but with this figure they put so many amazing little details all around her that the back of her hair should have been done much better. The flow as we get to the bottom looks terrific, and the thick strands really give off that lovely anime vibe. Upon her release, she was going for 18,333 yen. What an odd number to choose, especially since that's the exact same price as Good Smile Company's Pyra and Mithra. This means that 4 years prior, this figure released with all of this, and she was the same price as getting Mithra. Mithra is significantly bigger, but her base plate is complete and utter garbage. So I guess I could see them warranting a price point like that for this figure. However, I think it's due to the fact that she's kind of niche. It's not everybody that's going to go after something like this, and with Azur Lane having slowly dominated and just taken over the whole boat girl universe, I'm fairly certain this game is struggling. And it's a shame, because as much as I freaking love Azur Lane and a lot of their designs, we don't get anything as monstrous and cool as the Abyssal Fleet. They come pretty close, it's just they never go the full distance. Regardless, how many figures of the Abyssal Fleet are out there? And a lot of them tend to pump up on the secondary market due to the fact that it's just not in major circulation. And despite my few little gripes that I had with her hair, everything else on this figure is just absolutely beautiful. Super cute, super spicy. This figure has it all, depending on what your tastes are, of course. Can't all love creepy, cute, and spice. It's also a little unfortunate that she's a 1 on 8. She should have been a 1 on 7, especially at that price point. She would have looked a lot better standing next to Good Smile Company's WoW-class aircraft carrier, but regardless of that, as a standalone figure, she doesn't take up too much space. She's lower, so you can have other larger figures towering over her in a display cabinet, and she doesn't wobble, she's incredibly solid. So there's a lot of really good things going for her, and at the 1 in 8 scale. So hopefully my video review today helped you decide which side of the fence you're on getting her or not. She's actually my favorite abyssal design, and there are a lot of them that I really love, like flipping crazy. If you're a fan of the abyssal fleet, write in the comments section which one your favorite is. And why, because I always like to know why. Like, just typing the name is fine, you can do that if you want to, but it's always fun to find the reason behind one's passions. If you like my video just a little bit, it doesn't cost much to throw your anchor out on that like. Be sure to fish yourself out that nice subscribe, why don't you? And if you'd like to follow Erica to the Fog, be sure to ring that notification bell. It goes a crazy long way at helping and supporting my channel, which I really appreciate. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye! It's crazy how anytime I mention anything about either Kan Colle Collection or Azur Lane, someone from the opposing side will say, well, I prefer this one, or I prefer this one, and these are all my reasons why, and which makes sense. The games are two completely different games. I love bullet hell games, so Azur Lane, oh, I love it. I would play that game every single day if I could, but I spend all my time drawing and making these videos, so I don't have time for that. But boat girls are flipping sweet, and I would love to draw more of them if ever I had the chance or the time. However, if I had to say which design I prefer the most, I most probably would be going with Kouwan Seiki. I just really love this quite a bit, but it's the character development for people like Eugen. My issue with the Abyssal Fleet is there's not enough character development for it, and even when you watch the anime, everything's also shrouded in mystery. But I do like Perseus a bit more than I like this figure, even though I do prefer this one's design work. Perseus continuously saved me while playing the game, so it makes sense that I would get attached to that. There it is. There's that subjective part again. For real, all the boat girls from all the boat franchises are all amazing. As long as it's a Kansen, it's a win in my book.